And hello, and we are indeed live, and there would be two of us here as always. Pseudo, say hello.
Hello.
Wonderful, I now have you coming through loud and clear, all technical gremlins defeated. And hello to those of you joining us in Internet Land. This is episode 33 of the MMOBuff podcast, and we are going to be debating the free-to-play transition. How to do it, how not to do it, and how very much not to do it.
So you're basically saying there's a way to do it, there's a way not to do it, and then there's a way that is so far out in left field that basically space gremlins are going to fly down, suck people up into their spacesuits, and everyone's just going to, die.
That would probably be an improvement on some of the examples I've seen over the years. However...
Oh, ouch. Ouch. And hello to everybody out in internet lands. Hi. And I do know that it is a little bit rough with the chat today. Do be careful. And we do apologize. Unfortunately, there is a gigantic stream. I believe it's E3 that is currently having a huge stream. So I do understand if the chat is a little bit slow. But do know we are watching.
We can understand you not wanting to watch E3 because, well, it's myself and Pseudo, and what more could you possibly want?
Cookies?
Cookies would be good. So... let's dig into things a little, shall we? Free-to-play transition. Well, to start with, what is it? What does it mean? And is it inevitable? It's the moment when a game says, for insert reason here, we're not going to charge you a sub anymore. Now, the business model we're talking about is the one where typically you've bought the box, you're paying a monthly subscription, and then something happens to your game and it changes. Now, Pseudo, you're about to interject, because there's other models there as well. Feel free.
Well, this is the thing we need to clarify before we go into this. We're not talking about the games that were originally designed to be free-to-play to start. That's not what we're discussing here, because that's an entirely different methodology, a different model, and a different point. What we're talking about here are the games that have made the decision to go from one payment model to free-to-play. And there are multiple different types of payment models, because there are things like, buy the box, there is the buy the sub, there is the, invite a friend to do some crazy things and have pina coladas models. But the point behind it is there is originally a model, and then it goes free-to-play.
I'm sorry, the pina coladas model? I'm yet to play a game that gives me pina coladas. Where do I find this model?
You have to ask me after the show.
Okay, fine. So, first of all, going free to play, that transition, it's usually a traumatic experience for the players, because if you're in a game, if you're subbing, you're paying a monthly fee, you're part of that community, you've got certain expectations about the game. If you're paying a subscription, I hate to use the word entitlement because there's far too much entitlement going on in internet land these days, particularly in gaming, but you tend to have certain views as to life and to what you expect. You expect to get access to the game most of the time. Pretty much all the time, but things can go wrong. You expect there to be content. You probably expect there to be new content. And there's lots of good reasons for being a subscription model game. More resources, a more committed community that have invested in the game to actually want to play it. And quite often you're not necessarily going to want to see the changes you think are coming up when a game goes free to play. Free-to-play is being seen as, or has been seen, maybe I should say, as the last step for a dying game before it turns turtle and floats down the Swanee River. What can they do to get some more money out of this thing before it closes? Because after all, that's the only reason to go free-to-play, right?
No, some people also have the belief that going free-to-play is a way to ensure that they can produce less quality content and still have a game. Not necessarily that it's dying, but just simply the moniker free-to-play, that transition, it gets people kind of go, I guess, literally for lack of a better quality.
Okay, so let's look at then at why games might go free to play in the first place. Because one thing I discovered doing a little bit of research, and I knew there was a few, but there's an awful lot of them. And we're talking about some major games as well. We're not necessarily talking about some niche Asian game that no one over here has heard of, and we're not necessarily talking about games that are just made by indie studios. We're talking about big AAA titles that have gone down this free-to-play transitory route. So let's start by, without going into details about them, going which games have gone free-to-play that I could find in not very long. Rift. We all know about that.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, yes.
We'll come back to them for details individually. SWTOR
Yes.
very definitely has gone free-to-play. Defiance, as we know, went free-to-play last Wednesday. And in fact, that was the prompt to put this show together. I did an interview, which you're going to see shortly in an article, which is coming out shortly, trademark, all about Defiance and what they're doing with the game, with the transition with Season 2 of the show and everything else. And we'll touch on that a little later. But it led to some really interesting points as we discussed the business model of free-to-play and the rationale behind it. Terror Rising is another one. Did it used to be called Terror before it became Terror Rising? I'm not sure on that one. I know everyone just refers to it as Terror.
Honestly, I don't know.
One of the earliest ones to make this switch, and something Turbine were able to do as a test before they did other things, Dungeons and Dragons, or DDO Online. June the 9th, 2009, that went free to play. One of the first examples of it. Lotro followed not quite a year later, September 2010. But there's others as well. Ragnarok.
DCUO.
Ragnarok Online. That's another interesting one where their reasons for going free to play may be different to some of the others. Lineage 2. Aeon. Age of Conan. Now that one did rename itself. It went from Age of Conan something of Hyboria. And indeed, look, I did have the collector's edition purchased subbed box for that game before it went free to play. And then became Age of Conan Unchained, I think it became. Unchained. DCUO you just mentioned. Yes. EverQuest. Now, interestingly, EverQuest went free to play. The game that launched in 1999 eventually went free to play in 2012. And not perhaps for some of the same reasons as others again. There's still no shortage of players in that game. EverQuest 2 followed at about the same time. I think it was a couple of months in it, if memory serves me correctly. And any others you can think of? Any others, chat? Can we find any other games we know that have gone sub to free to play?
Honestly, there's just those that come to mind that we've put in there, and I forgot to mention to you DCUO ahead of time because they've done something a little bit, in my opinion, cruel. And their direction and their choice for doing it, and I will wait till we reach a certain point, and then I will put my hand up and go, and that is what DCUO does, and that is why it is frustrating.
Okay. So let's look at then at why these games, let's try English, have made these transitions. This isn't just a small subset of niche games without players. You can't look at that list and say that. You can say in some of these cases they're games that perhaps didn't hit the highest peaks they expected. Let's look at AOC, Age of Conan. Fantastic concept, great backstory, so much there to dig into. A lot of bugs when it launched, a lot of problems, perhaps never hit its peak, took a couple of years to get everything ironed out, and that's probably the typical example of a game that felt the need to increase headcount. And one of the few ways for them to do it was to go free to play. But there are really three main mantras people can come up with to say why go free to play in the first place. And probably the best reason to go free to play is accessibility. This is something that Trion have got a good handle on, and have done so with Rift and with others as well. And to say, if we can get our game into the hands of more people, what can we then do with it? Can we get, 10 times the players, argument's sake, and have a small group of them say, hey, we'll tell you what, we really like this game, we'll kick something back. I mean, they used the phrase, they talked about if they want to donate $1 or $2. They need more than $1 or $2 to keep themselves running, I should add. So I'm not sure it should be donate, but if people like the experience and want to reward the developers for the experience, plus game benefits themselves, that seems entirely valid. Having headcount, though, is another reason. It's as simple as that. If you don't have enough players in your game, if your game is not vibrant, if it is not alive, eventually you're going to get less revenue because your headcount will continue to tumble. So this isn't saying we want more people in because we can, it's good for the game. It's actually saying we need more people, else our game is going to be no fun to play. Pretty different. Easily covered in marketing language, so it sounds to be very, very similar, but two very different drivers. And you can see when you look at the games which ones are approaching it from which particular facet. Finances is, of course, one of the fundamental reasons to look at going free-to-play. Now, in an MMO market where a strong game with a huge headcount, WoW is now hitting 7.7 million, at its peak it hit 12, it is the monolith, it is the exception to the rule. There are other games out there that are doing very, very nicely with 1 million, 2 million subs. And
that's nothing to sniff at.
I would quite like 1 million to 2 million subs. I'd have a nice yacht at this point.
Well, think about it. Granted, think about the cost. Let's say that you're paying, we'll say £8 a month for subscription, and you have 1 million subscribers.
Yep.
How much money is that, Ms.?
Is this before or after we take off taxes, distribution networks?
No. This is just net. This is net.
Pulling in 8 million a month in currency of your choice, as long as it's not some currency I've never heard of that has 8 million something or others to the pound, and you're doing pretty well.
Okay, so you have that, and then let's just say you lose 50 to 60% of it for taxes. You still got 3.4, 3.6 sitting there.
Yeah.
And then you've got to pay everybody, and then you've got to pay the development, and then you've got costs are expensive.
If you are getting
but it's still nothing to sniff at.
No. I mean, if you are getting in excess of 1 million subs, you probably have an operating model to do something with in an MMO marketplace. And that's without the hype of looking at the we have thousands of people type scenarios. Now, beyond that, there is, of course, the final reason to go free-to-play. And that's not just population density, it's survival. Is this game actually going to be around? Is it going to have a rationale for continued development and investment in the game if we don't do something to change the way we create revenue? And this is where we enter into a really dangerous slope. So some games, broad brush, going free to play to get it in the hands of more players because they've got a great play experience. They've found good ways of monetizing the game. They're happy with their revenue streams, and if they can get more players playing the game, everybody wins. Okay, so let's drop back in, and we'll try and pick up where we left off. Sorry for those who have had a little delay in the show. Survival. It's another reason for going free to play, or at least making pretty drastic changes to your business model, and this is usually what tends to happen. If you need to do something to reinvigorate your game, if you need to get players back in, if you need to get revenue, if you need to create a rationale for continuing investment in your game, it's another option. But it's a very, very treacherous slope, because if that's your rationale for making this change, there are probably underlying issues with your game anyway. And have you necessarily fixed them just by saying, hey, come play and let us charge you to wear a green t-shirt? Or whatever it is they decide to come up with.
Oh, that's great. Green t-shirt, I charge you.
Stranger things have happened.
Yes, they have. I will agree with you there.
So here's where we get to the issue. If you have a free-to-play game, on one hand, you want everyone to play your game. And you want everyone to have a fantastic experience so they keep playing your game. But on the other hand, you actually technically want everyone to give you money. It's very simple. If you are a company and you are producing a service which you wish to be consumed by consumers, you tend to have a predilection towards cold, hard cash. And that's a predilection that you need to balance. Because if you're going to say in my free-to-play game, do everything, unless you're selling hats in a well-known shooter, you're probably going to want to give people some form of incentive. And in an MMO marketplace, saying wear a hat for cash probably doesn't cut it. Now, this leads to companies doing some very strange things indeed. Sometimes it's a case of get to level X, then you need to pay to go further. Well, that's more like a trial to me, just wrapped up in fancy marketing. Sometimes, though, you need to pay to get access to certain pieces of content. Now, on one hand, you can go, that's not unlike a DLC, be it first day on disc, downloaded later, or whatever it might be. But that's actually pretty divisive within an MMO community, because you have those that can, you have those that can't. And one of the risks you get with an MMO, where people come together with a shared experience to play games, is you're actually separating them into various classes of citizens. Those that can, those that can't, and those that would like to, but need to grind 400,000 pfennigs first off the local rats before they can pay to enter the doors of the dungeon once, to think of another game.
You have to be very careful in how you phrase this one, Ms., because the reality is, anytime you have an MMO, you're going to have multiple classes. It makes no difference what type of subscription model that is in use. For example, you have those who can do the grind to raid level, those who do the PvP grind, those who have the time to do their dailies, those who have the time to do this, that, or the other, those who have the cash. It makes a difference whether you put insert resource of time or cash here. You have inside MMOs, naturally, a decisive who fits into what kind of class in that particular society. So I wouldn't necessarily want to say that it's the free-to-play market that ensures that and creates this class diversion. I think, however, it can add to the diversions, not the diversions, but the separations in the class society more so. It can add a huger strain to it, and that's what I would rather say.
Okay, so let's look at a couple of things here. And let me go back to my magical list. And let's look at a few choices that people have actually made. Because ultimately, whether it's by design or not, you're setting up barriers, be they barriers to convenience, whether they're allowing you to spend more or less time, another resource, more or less currency to achieve certain things. You are creating an environment for a subscriber, post-free-to-play, where they have an advantage. Now, ultimately, they probably want to be more powerful. And that ultimately is bad, because that leads you into the avenue of pay to win. There are games out there where the best weapons are only available on the auction house for cash. Now, that tends to be more so in the Asian MMO marketplace than in the European or the American one. But in an area where a player cannot be as optimal as another player unless they can outspend them at an auction house is bad. And to see that in something billed as free to play, I find to be a misnomer. Yes, it's technically free to play, but if you want to compete, if you want to be the best, if you want to enjoy, for my part, enjoy playing, because the whole point of playing for many of us is to be competitive, it's not really free to play at all. So let's look at some of the things that people have done. And I'll come back and pick on a couple of these in a moment, because the balancing act with free-to-play is how do they put in place limitations or restrictions on one hand, perks on the other hand, be they cosmetic or otherwise, and create enough of a draw to make people want to sub. Because if there's no rationale to sub whatsoever, there aren't so very many gamer philanthropists out there that will actually just pay because they like the developers. There's some, and I wish there were more, but human nature is what it is. So there has to be this tiering. Much as we don't like it, it has to exist to actually make the model work. Cold, hard logic. So, Rift. Pretty open in my view. You can do pretty much most things. Company that got it reasonably right. No Storm Legion souls. would probably be one of the bigger ones as of today. Auction house is purchase only. And I think there's a restriction on character slots, but I'm not so sure if that's true anymore. Pseudo.
That's the thing, you know, the concept and the style of play that I like to play in a game is denied me and barred me unless I pay the subscription model for Rift. If I had a different style of play that I like to play, I'd be perfectly fine. But my style of play is denied me unless I buy a subscription.
So what can't you do without a subscription in Rift?
When it came to Rift, I really liked, and I can't remember the class name of it because it's been a couple of months since I went back to check it out and everything. But it was one of these souls comboed, because you can mix souls up, which is one of the beautiful things about Rift, is the fact that it allows that kind of flexibility. But the particular souls that I wanted to combine, I couldn't do it unless I paid for it.
So you happen to be wanting to use a Storm Legion soul.
Oh, well, I believe it was the Storm Legions. I can't remember exactly which one it was now because, like I said, it's been a couple of months. But it was the thing that made me put the game down, to be perfectly honest with you.
But I guess
it was just one of those...
But this is where you pose the question. So, again, I haven't been in Rift for a while, but we used to be in there. Now, when the expansion came out, they took the souls that were part of the expansion and said you either have to have a box copy of the expansion on your account or be a premium subscriber to be able to access these souls. Now, is it 8 or 12 of them out of the whole mix are Storm Legion souls? So it sounds to me like you're trying to combo one of those from the expansion with one of those from the original game.
Yeah.
Now, where would be the fair line for them to draw? Should they allow that soul but not another one? One you don't happen to play?
No, see, that's the thing. You have to put this into context. Like I said, one of the really brilliant things about Rift is the fact that you have the ability to create insane combos of putting these different souls together. It's like you're basically able to say, I'm going to be a disciplined priest and I'm also going to be an enhancement shaman in the same class. You know, you have an amazing amount of flexibility there. I understand that they had to draw a line somewhere, but it is almost a painful thing for me because at the time there was no way I could pay for the soul. There was no way for me to get my hands on that. It wasn't even like I could grind to a point where I could get that soul. I had no real option there. And unfortunately, they may have opened it up for free to play, but because of the style of play that I like, they actually barred my type of play, which made me kind of sit there and go, I can't dedicate anything to this with the limited time that I had. Now, that's not a fault on their part because I understand there needs to be a line drawn. It's just, for me, it basically destroyed my ability to enjoy playing the game because I couldn't play what I'd like to play. One of the key things you hear from people is I want to play what I want to play. I want to play the things that I am interested in. And if I had another way of getting to that, be it, you know, grinding out, you know, frozen bananas for 40 hours a week, I probably would have done that. I probably would have dedicated my time to it, but there was no other alternative to it. Okay. And unfortunately, that's just what ended the game for me. This is not to say they've made a bad decision in their choice, and I want to stress that. I just want to state that as the type of player that I am, I was literally barred from the get-go.
A key point we're taking away here is they put in some... They left pretty much all content, access to content accessible. Put some restrictions in on a handful of the classes, class archetypes.
Some of them were the ones that you needed in order to be the best in endgame as well, which is well worth noting.
Okay. But what the real takeaway here is they didn't provide an alternate path. No. Now, I would have to score them down for not giving an alternate path. But it depends on what marker. Are we scoring in terms of the relevance and the likelihood for it not to be restrictive to players? Or are we scoring on, was this balanced? Does this mean their game is likely to survive and prosper and give them income? And whether or not that's a black mark or a plus mark probably depends on which side of the fence you actually sit. Now, Rift has a decent population. It is still going. There are people still enjoying the game. Yes. And so on that basis...
It's an incredibly fun game. I highly recommend people to try it. I mean, they brought an incredibly novel concept for world design in also class mechanic into the MMO genre. If you haven't had a chance to check it out, it's at least well worth looking at it and seeing what they've done in their designs and things like that. But, you know, It almost seems as if the thing you need to keep in mind when you do any kind of transition to free to play is, you know, where do you want the limit to be? Do you want the limit to be the people who are the one percenters who are going to try to hit your end content and devour it? Or are you wanting the one percenters to be the person who logs in every 3 days just to check the auction house and maybe do a little bit of farming while they're on the phone with their grandmother in Tennessee? You know, you have to figure out where your line is. And we're not lucky enough to have the metrics. We're not lucky enough to have the actual scaling, because one of the things that I found fascinating about the interview that you happened to do this past weekend with Treon was the fact that they have constant market research being done. I'd love to actually see the results of these research, because one of the things we stress is, you know, players say, I need this. And developers are like, yeah, if we gave you this, you'd stop playing because you're bored. Mm-hmm. You know, knowing what they need and what they want are very vast different things. But
this is a repeating thing.
Exactly. It is a repeating thing, but it always goes back to the metrics. And one of these days, I'm going to convince somebody out there who is in the game land world, let us see these metrics and let us actually kind of see what is actually being produced. I'm really curious.
There is actually a company, name escapes me, we spoke to them, who actually produce these metrics on behalf of all of the companies. So there may be a follow-up phone call there to make, because that could be an interesting show. Now, I
know exactly which one you're referring to, and hopefully we'll run across.
Now let's look at some others. SW Tour. I'm going to come back to that one.
No, you're not. You're going to tackle that one, and you're going to beat it to a pulp in the same way that I'm going to sit there and cross my eyes over DCUO.
Okay. SW Tour for me was the worst quarter-arsed attempt at making a fundamentally unplayable game even less playable than I've ever seen through some of the worst restrictive choices going. It is the first time in my life I have seen a game transition to free-to-play and ask you to pay to access part of the GUI. I almost can't say anything else there. If you went free-to-play...
No. They're the ones who made the decision that when we went free to play, you had to pay in order to wear the gear that you had already earned.
That's the one.
And that is the one that made me just want to say, I'm sorry, what? You did what now?
So,
and that's kind of my
So here is the thing. Players in internet land tend to be reasonably smart. And unfortunately, if a company appears to be doing no more than trying to leverage cash out of people for no return, whilst marketing that the game is free to play and accessible. And please note, I have no objection to a submodel. I support submodels. I personally prefer them if your game is worth the time and the effort. But to state your game is one thing while it's clearly not, that I have a big problem with. So we're going to take a look at some of the forms of restrictions that people can put into games. And the beauty of SW Tour is I think we're now going to see all of them in one place.
Go for it. Go for it. I know you've been dying to share this.
Okay.
And Dawis has also asked us a question as to what MMO they'd recommend people starting on. But we'll get to your question in specific, Dawis.
It's quite topical right now.
It is an incredibly topical conversation, but at the same time, it is very difficult to direct somebody without getting a really good idea of what it is that you find interesting. So it's things along the lines of, is it the combat play? Is it access to, I don't know, playing the auction house? Do you really want to dance? Do you want to have emotes? Do you not want to have emotes? And I'm seeing some trouble between you and I, Miz. Are you still there?
I'm still here. Can you not see me? I see and hear you
now
loud and clear. Okay. So we're going to cut
over... You're breaking
over...
up for me something fierce today.
I'm not... We don't know what's happening quite here then. We'll see what's going on. So I'm going to move to our web cut here, and here we go. We have the screen for Star Wars, The Old Republic. Now, this is live on their website as of today. Now, I've been told that the situation has improved dramatically for free-to-play since I last logged out of the game. So let's take a look. Now, we all know that you can get, or let's point out, to be fair, that you can get preferred status just by being a subscriber and unsubbing post the switch around. And again, to be fair, A lot of the items that are restrictions, you can get I believe it's a black market cartel item for a one-time unlock. And some of these can be bought with gold in-game, ground to, and others of them can't. So the first thing you get, or you do get if you're a free player, is you get to see the story. Yep, you can run your full class story from 1 to 50. Fantastic. Mainstay of the game for many people. But you can't learn to run until you're level 10. Yet you get it at level 1 if you're preferred or if you sub. Now, at what point is a character's movement ability on their base character themselves something that's necessarily up for debate? I'd like to see someone roleplay this. I can't run because... insert blank here in a story-driven game. Let's ignore that one and move on, shall we?
No, see, that's just it. You know darn well that you would have to come up with some kind of crazy story because you're not an RPer, Mizpah.
I'm absolutely not, but it's such an odd, arbitrary thing, and it's one hand saying those that pay will give you access to more convenience, and that is okay. Additional convenience for those people that are paying the bills. Convenience, not power. Yet here, they're saying,
it is a PvP.
Hang on a minute. Let me put some manacles round your ankles for no other reason than we want to force you to give us some cash. It's different. And it smells bad. Okay, Fleet Pass. Now this is the teleport back to home base. Now, you can get the Fleet Pass at level 10, a longer cooldown, or you can buy an item to go back to the normal cooldown, I do believe. No, you need to be subbed now to not get the cooldown. Okay? So, less teleporty type ability. I don't have so much of a problem with that one. One crew skill.
I have to ask, did you hear my comment? Because apparently our connection...
No, I heard... And you're now...
Real quick, but when you were mentioning about sprint, I sound like a robot, don't I?
Actually, you keep going silent, so I'm not aware you're talking. I'm not even getting you breaking up. Try now.
And I can't hear anything. Oh, well.
I can hear you. And I dare say people can hear you as well.
Can you hear me now?
I hear you now.
Okay, all I was saying was that when it comes to sprint, that is actually impacting PvP as well.
It does, yes.
And now I can't hear anything. You continue talking about Thor and the restrictions, and we'll see if we can't figure out what's up behind the scenes here at the studio a la Pseudo.
Fair enough. Now, crew skills. Okay, fair enough. You don't get to do as much crafty stuff. You're basically picking one skill tree, not two skill trees, effectively. But again, I've not seen this. This is not a case of, we'll give you something else. This is a case of we're taking something away. Let's look at bank storage. Yep, it's accessible with cartel coin purchase. So again, you have to get hold of a different currency to actually have access to a bank. Credit cap. Yeah, fair enough. You can't hold as many credits. Don't have a problem with that one. Chat. I don't like the chat restrictions, but I do understand them because they are sometimes needed. Lots of games do this. Let's just explain why for a moment. If you need to basically combat sort of money laundering and people hacking accounts and all the rest of it, you don't want someone using someone else's account to whisper and to send mails and to say, buy gold now here, or whatever it is. So for free accounts that people can just make and that are disposable, they put some communication restrictions on them to say, we're not going to have you make a free account for the purpose of spamming gold adverts, because unfortunately people do. Don't like it, does make sense. And this appears now to be the solo show. And the windows will all change position, so we'll fix that in just a moment while you're getting the joy of listening to the sound of my voice. Oh dear. Now then, we're going to click over here and just check for no urgent messages in chat. We don't see any, and we're going to flick back. Mail. Can't use it. Secure trading. Can't use it. Galactic Trade Network. You can only list 2 things on the auction house. Yeah, that one's okay. Character creation. Less character slots. Yep. And 3 species options. Less choices in terms of what you want to play. Okay. And now we have the things that are just daft. Operations. A weekly pass to unlock operation access. So we do see some content gating in other games. DDO, for example, has some. But to say I'd like a weekly pass to enter a dungeon or go on a raid, not so much. I can do 5 battlegrounds a week. Again, I don't see that one anywhere else. Flashpoints, these are indeed the dungeons. You get rewards from 3, and then no more loot. Space missions. These are the shooters where you get to play the X-Wing type pilot. 3 per week. And then they're gone. And finally, well, the list just goes on. Can join a guild, that one's okay. Takes longer to earn XP, that one not so sure about. That's a little bit more of a balanced one. This one is simply idiotic. I'm sorry, whoever decided it would be a good idea to allow a free-to-play player to not have access to as much of the UI as someone else, that's just daft. And items, augment slots, it's all just getting very, very silly. Things cost you more to do stuff with your armor, things like that. So this was not a case of this game has gone free to play. Hey, let's log in and play. No, this game has now gone restrict to play. Log in with a whole load of artificial handcuffs and shackles and things that, to me, pretty much guarantee you're no longer going to enjoy the game. And as Pseudo pointed out earlier, when all of a sudden, after completing some of the operations, the raids in the game, and earning gear, as a subscriber, then logging back in once it goes free to play, no longer a subscriber, to discover I need to pay again to wear the gear that I previously earned? I don't know what planet you were on, but it wasn't a planet in this particular galaxy. Pseudo, are you back with us?
Yeah.
Wonderful. In that case, I shall push this magic button, and we should have the screens back. So, what do you think of SWTOR going free to play?
I understand why they did it. They were taking some very, very heavy hits financially. Really, really nasty. And in all honesty, the free-to-play model is a success because microtransactions are things that make the internet world go around. I mean, I hate to say it, but take any game that you can get on your mobile phone, on your iPad or something like that has little microtransactions, and most people look at it and go, $1. What's it going to hurt to buy a couple of gems for $1? I need a couple more gems. Let me just get a few more. I mean, there are people out there who will actually, after checking their finances each month, pay more than what a subscription would cost, and yet they think because of the choice that is being offered to them that they're paying for what they want, they're actually getting a benefit. When it comes to Tor, and I'm going to throw out DCUO, DCUO kind of frustrates me as well. There is something to be said when you limit the ability for players to play together. And DCUO did something with their free-to-play model that made my head spin. You couldn't trade with your friends. You couldn't use the mailbox. You can't use the auction house. They completely limited your ability to be with friends.
How much of that limitation, in terms of sort of transactional limitations? Okay, can't use the mailbox, can't use the auction house, can't trade. Same restrictions as SWTOR, actually. Those to me aren't the worst of it, because there are actually some legitimate reasons if the account is disposable. So if
I can understand this. Believe me, I can get this. But if you have people trying to play together and you put that restriction down as a security mechanism to prevent gold spammers, gold buyers, and other things like that.
Which it is, in all fairness.
What you're basically saying is if you're not paying a subscription, you are one. The default classification, you are thrown under that severity. I don't necessarily like that choice. There is a way to do it and a way to handle it. For example, if you are playing with a friend, you should be able to approve a friend to be able to send you a mailbox item or to trade with you. You should still have those kinds of options available available. But in all honesty, when you cut out the ability for people to work together, like if I get these awesome boots for my superhero and I want to use them, great. But if I get boots and I accidentally click need when my friend needed those boots more than me and I can't even say here, it demolishes group play experience.
It does, and I dare say, as you're pointing out, to say whitelist based on friend list is a good solution. I think that you really do need some level of restriction. We all know that bots and farmers do go out of control. Sad but true. I wonder how simplistic or difficult it is to actually hardwire that in if it's not been designed into the environment from day one. I can think of some reasons why it actually wouldn't be a very simple retrofit to an existing code base in a game.
Now, see, I understand that. I do. And, you know, whether you've got a trialist account or something else like that, that's kind of, I think, the problem I have with the free-to-play models of Tor and of DCUO. You're not seen as someone who's going to consistently play this game. You're seen as a trialist forever, and all of those restrictions are placed upon you. So, you know, it's kind of almost like... if it's going to be a trialist account, don't call it free-to-play. Call it trialist for life, so people understand the restrictions that are coming their way.
But if they market lifetime trial accounts, that isn't going to meet some of the objectives of going free-to-play in the first place.
Well, then they need to come up with better terminology. I would rather have a game be bloody honest with me than me logging in thinking that there is an option for something, thinking that there is a way to work around something. Just tell me, if you are a pay-to-win model, just bloody say it.
But of course, that's very rare you'll find someone saying, yes, we sell power. Because most gamers claim not to want that, despite the fact many of them would actually purchase it if it were made available to them. Hence the dichotomy.
Again, need be want. Darn you, players. Now, darn you.
There are ways of going free-to-play in a manner that is not so disruptive to the community. There are alternative models out there that combine free-to-play with other ideas. Plex, Eve, Cred, Carbine, Wildstar. These things are now starting to be the route forward for many people. But there are many different mindsets. Now, Pseudo, I'm unaware, which bit of audio did we clip? And would this be a good time to play that quote?
Actually, it would. These are two questions that you had specifically asked involving why the choice was made to go free-to-play, but also not just the business model behind it, but how are they trying to help out and balance out the subscriber versus the person who's just coming in under free-to-play?
Okay, so let's try and fire up this media file. It is, of course, not doing a lot now while I'm trying to add it. Right, we're going to do this another way because it's not playing nicely. This is where we play incidental hold music, of course, for a few moments. Can we have some elevator music, please, Pseudo? No, I didn't actually literally mean elevator. Okay, I believe we've now rapidly solved that one. And we're going to try and get this to play nicely now. Okay, well, let's touch briefly on the free-to-play transition, because it throws up a host of hurdles. And I guess the first question is one from a business driver perspective. What are the rationale and the drivers for the switch? For how long has this been planned? And what are you hoping for in terms of outcomes?
Sure. Let me grab this one. So the thing that especially that we've seen with massively online games that have a social element to them, Rift being our first one that does, and Defiance does also, where the game is the game as a whole is genuinely better with other people around when you've got this world, a dynamic world full of massive events. So more people always equals more fun, and that is deep into our game design. And so when we've got games that function like that, naturally it becomes best to figure out ways to lower the barriers to getting the largest numbers of people in as possible. And what we've seen over the last couple of years is that the barrier of an upfront purchase actually is the biggest barrier of all. We started getting, our own research showed this, beginning back 3 or 4 years ago. And what we were really waiting for was, at what point is the perception out there to where people no longer equate free-to-play as a commentary on quality. And so that's why we're now confident with our AAA games, and sending out our AAA games as all free-to-play. We like that a lot because it helps us stand out, and it also helps get the largest number of people in the games, which increases the fun for everybody.
Okay. Now, that is Scott Hartzman, I do believe, who, of course, is the CEO of Tryon. You can see his details there, nicely pulled up, so you can see who you're talking to. Now, they've got an interesting take on things, and one that I don't find at all offensive, if I'm honest. Your views, Pseudo.
Helps if I unmute my microphone, because I didn't want anyone to hear my static while we were recording or playing that recording. But, right, when it comes to what Defiance are doing, there are a couple of things that really stand out to me that make this a much better transition than some of the ones that we've discussed so far. To start off with, what we have is a transition specifically about still allowing the people who have paid to have access to something, understanding that there are going to be some people who actually care about Season 1 content and some people who don't, and having flexible options available. And I see an inception on the Twitch stream right now because of what you're displaying on the broadcasting software. So I just see inception straight through. But yes, I mean, number one, they recognize the fact that they wanted people to see that the free-to-play transition is not something that is less quality. Two, they want to make certain that what they're bringing about in their free-to-play model is actually beneficial and balanced. So one of the things they've made mention in the interview is if you go off and you say, find the game, what you're actually buying the box-wise is you're going to get content that's equating to as if you made an in-game purchase. You know, and they did discuss that when they did this, there was a huge run on games with Rift when they did this, and you know, they didn't expect it to happen, but hey, you know, it makes sense. People value a bargain. If they think they're getting a bargain, they're going to go for it. You know, that's kind of how it functions. But one of the things that they stress is that they want people to play together. They want people to experience things together, and they want to make certain that the free-to-play model that they are implementing is not in any way, shape, or form one of those restrictive, free-to-restrict kind of models that they have in place. You know, there are going to be some things that are obviously built into, you know, you've got to pay to gain access, etc. But you have to have something to buy, or there is no...
Well, their take on purchase, of course, is all about convenience and catch-ups.
Yes, exactly.
To allow you to sort of
it's a little bit like what Secret World does.
But let's move on to the second question you picked out from the interview. How, therefore, I know the various schemes you offer, but how, therefore, do you handle the transition for those players that have previously made sort of the upfront commitment and the ongoing commitment to play the game?
Yeah, and that's a fantastic question. We have this policy of disproportionate response. Basically, anytime something that's perceptibly, you know, could be perceived as bad happens, we want to make sure that people feel like they are on the receiving end of a windfall of goodness. And so we've done this with Rift. We're doing it with Defiance as well, and it was actually really successful. Where for people who had previously purchased, or if people can still go out in the store and find a box now, they're going to get a multiple of all of the essentially box freebies that come in. So for instance, if you go out and find a Defiance box in a store right now and you pay $10, $20 for it, you're probably going to get about $50 worth of in-game stuff. And so the idea is, we actually had such a success with Rift that we created a run on our boxes, which was not really what we expected at all. And so we're repeating the same thing with Defiance.
And on that note, we'll pull ourselves back again. And indeed, just as you said, they came up with a series of benefits. The net result is more boxes got sold. Not quite what they expected, but it does illustrate that players had to actually perceive that the benefits of the paid version of the account were meaningful.
windfall. You know, it's all about perception. And this is the problem with the free-to-play moniker. The free-to-play moniker evokes dodgy graphics, bug-laden things, boring, you know, active combat or combat in general, or you take it to the other extreme and it limits you can't play this game to actually be successful if you play in the free-to-play model, you know, period. There are so many perception-based concepts to free-to-play. And in all honesty, I don't think it's kind that some of the AAA games that are out there that have gone free-to-play have only added to those perceptions as being real. I love you, Tor, but oh my God, seriously. You have pretty much destroyed chances of future games who want to go to the free-to-play model because you've introduced the free-to-restrict. And that is something that, in all honesty, is pretty much killer.
It's worth pointing out, though, there are others that do it badly, and there's others that do it well. I, for example, have a lifetime subscription to Lotro. And I refuse to log in because I am getting bombarded with invitations to visit the cash shop every time I sneeze. I do not like the fact
Stop sneezing.
To be competitive in crafting, to be using my time efficiently, I have to buy 37 boosts, even if I don't need them. I don't like the fact that the stipend of currency that I get forevermore is less and less meaningful due to inflation, and no one ever seems to address that fact. So there's a ton of things that they get wrong as well. So they're not the only ones, and it's a shame. Great story, some really good things about that MMO, but they're too forward in pushing a sales approach into the face of the player. Tor turned around and said, let us restrict you to make you come and buy stuff from us. Lotro appear to be saying, let me just remind you about the store. Oh, did I tell you about the store? And by the way, while you're doing this quest, oh, there's a store. To the point where there's a store, by the way, to the point where it's really, really annoying.
Mizpah, is there a store?
I don't know. I don't log in anymore.
Wow, okay, fair enough.
But others do get it right as well. It's early days for Defiance. We don't know where they're going to go yet. If you're looking for a jump-in shooter, if you're a fan of the sci-fi series, give it a look. Let us know what you think about it. But on the surface, it doesn't appear to be overly restrictive.
Well, see, this is the thing, you know, the free-to-play model is always going to piss somebody off because there's always going to be something that somebody wants access to that is part of the restriction. For example, I really like the concept of RIP. My class is inaccessible unless I pay. You know, so for me, that's going to screw me over. For somebody else who doesn't care about my style of play, it's going to be like, yeah, so what? It's not my style of play. I'm not worried about it. Screw you. I'm going home. You know, it really makes a difference. But when it comes to games, now this is the thing. The free-to-play model with Defiance, it was a decision that they didn't make lightly. It was something that they've discussed in detail, and they've ensured to build mechanic into the game to compensate for the fact that they are doing this new style of marketing models, so to speak, this new style of selling. The thing to keep in mind, though, and this is something that I think some people may forget, the beauty behind Defiance is the fact that it is interlinked with a television show, which means there is possibility that the reason why they're able to support the free-to-play model they're taking is because of ad revenue from their show.
I don't actually know that or how that works.
That's why I said there's a possibility. That's the thing. You know, there is something that is going on with Defiance that I have not seen in any other MMO. They are not just building content for players. They are building content that interlinks with another media source that is consistent, that is on a schedule that needs to be kept. Yeah. And thus they have to keep themselves up with the scheduling and the linking and everything else that goes with it. And you'll learn all about this in Mizpah's article because, yeah, he went crazy with this stuff. But because of this interlinking parts, what's to say that the two don't help balance each other out? What's to say the two don't help in some way, shape, or form balance the profit so that one can be done with the other? Because one of the things that makes Defiance crazy is they have in-house voice acting. They don't have to go out and pay for somebody else to do it. It's done in-house. Sort of like the Blizzard model does. You know how Blizzard has its own orchestra, it has its own vocal people, it's got its own designers and its own everything.
It also has a few more resources available compared to most MMOs.
Very, very true. But see, that's the thing. You know, we sit here and we gripe about a lot of games not having, you know, voiceover acting or something like that. It's an expensive process, but a lot of what people take for granted, because there is some brilliant voice acting in Defiance. If you haven't played the game, like I say, just go check it out. But because of the fact that they have this all built in-house, it actually saves them money.
We shall.
So, yeah.
We shall see. So let's summarize. You can go free to play for valid reasons. If your game frankly sucks in the first place, going free to play is not a magic salve unless you're actually changing the game. Now, typically there's rewrites, launches, patches, and sometimes they're bringing good changes. So there's no guarantee that a game that was poor before free to play isn't necessarily improved. But is it improved enough? And the only way you're going to find out is playing it. But if you want to get and retain players, then you need to be going free to play for reasons of accessibility. You need to be looking to monetize via things like cosmetics and convenience. You need to not gate players and communities away not only from content, but from each other by the choices that you actually make. And for the love of all things to do with MMOs, don't go down the free to restrict model. Pseudo, any closing thoughts?
I couldn't agree more.
Now we've got that on camera. And there is our natural cut away from today's show. This has been episode 33 of the MMO Buff podcast. Pseudo, what's coming up for the rest of the week?
We have some crazy things coming up, and now I actually get a chance to talk. You know, I totally let you monologue today. I hope you appreciate that.
I did notice.
Because, yeah. But anyway, tomorrow night is the campfire, and tomorrow night we have just Real Blank Space, Screenager, and myself. We discussed the launch survival of a community and how painful it can be, and we discussed some of the lessons learned that we've had this past launch when it came to WildStar, along with other games. This week, we are now talking about post-launch. What happens now? Now you've got people who are supposed to meet the goals that you set, be it leveling goals, be it rating goals, be it PvP goals, be it login goals, be it hangout goals, be it whatever goals you have. We're going to be discussing the post-launch survival.
Can we have an attunement discussion in there, please?
Shush. On Wednesday, we have the Blizzard forecast, where we have a good portion of the team back. Real Blank Space will not be with us on that show. However, I have no doubt in my mind that the team will be going back to lose more Heroes of the Storm games. I'm dying to see you guys win one. I really am. But you'll also have Trollden, Dr. Marshmallow, and myself doing a bit of Hearthstone review as well. And then Warlords of Draenor. There is some things going on in there that need to be discussed, and you know, we'll leave it into the team's hand to actually discuss it. Then on Thursday at 1 p.m., during our show specifically for game developers, by game developers, hosted by a game enthusiast, we are going to be having there's two things that can occur this Thursday, and we're trying to figure out what's going to happen. Actually, technically, three things. We have a couple of guests who are interested in joining us, but we need to verify that they can make that particular time, because developers' schedules, especially during QA, is incredibly tight, and how much time they have to dedicate. But we could have someone joining us who is a part of a very well-known game, a lead developer for a very well-known game. We may have somebody coming in to teach people how to actually do shaders and things like that, which is going to be insane, because that is a design concept unto its own, the whole concept of how you handle shading. And yeah, that's a big talk. Or it may end up being, because we discussed game engines last week, we may actually talk about different programming languages this week. We don't know what's going to happen, but this Thursday at 1 p.m., that's that. Friday, we got the Cosmotronic team back together again. We are going to be changing the format of the show, and next week is going to be one of those very first reformats. And yes, we will still have news coming in for what's going on in the WildStar universe, so you will want to make certain that you do turn in just to catch a hold of the news. But there are possibilities of other things, because yes, we have secrets, and yes, I am a cryptic pseudo, and I do apologize, but some things I am under NDA, and all I can do is tease you about them, and I'm not allowed to tell you, because teasing is the only thing I'm allowed to do.
But we are allowed to remind people that we're going to have guests.
Yes, but I am allowed to say we're going to have guests. That's about all I can do. So, you know, that's yeah. Then on Saturday at 8 p.m., we have Top Draw. Dr. Marshmallows and myself are going to be looking at UI, UX design of Battle for Gia. And this is great because finally we're getting into a show where Dr. Marshmallows doesn't know as much as I do. And it's going to be brilliant. So, I mean, we've already had a huge debate about, well, we should have a client on the system. I'm like, well, yeah, but you don't have the resources. And I got into that, and Marshall's like, I never thought of that. So I can actually outshine Dr. Marshmallow in intelligence occasionally. And this is one of those shows where I actually get a chance to, I guess you could say, toot my own whistle, blow my own horn. I'm excited about that. We'll see, though, because knowing Dr. Marsh will have done research on everything and outshine me yet again. Love that guy. And then next Monday, Mizpah and I are back again for discussions about MMOs and any topic that sort of relates to it and things like that.
And we'll see what that will be a little nearer the time, but it is that time again. It is disappearing time for those of you filtering in from E3. You're going to have to catch it on YouTube, but that's not too difficult to do.
Although I will state, for those of you who have made that leap to not just spread the word about when our shows are, but to actually become subscribers, the archives are available for subscribers on Twitch. But yes.
Fabulous.
Otherwise, you can just wait till it's on YouTube.
You can indeed. On that note, folks, good night. Have fun. Keep playing games. This is Mizpah for MMOBuff. Signing off.
Doodle pip.